Good evening. Welcome to this workshop of the Hopkins School Board. We have two agenda items this evening. We are going to start with our board retreat planning and discuss that for a bit. And then we'll move into our superintendent goals with Dr. Mary Perry-Reed. So I'll provide a bit of framing for the board retreat discussion. So the Hopkins School Board meets in a retreat format typically 2 times a year. And in alignment with Minnesota open meeting law, those retreats are posted and function as workshops. So members of the public can come and observe the retreat in action. We typically do these in August and in January. This board in its current configuration had our first retreat together in January because we were so fortunate to have 2 new board members join us at the beginning of January. And at that retreat, we focused on restorative practices. That is a focus of the district. Anyone who's joining us via the YouTube live stream has probably heard us talk about restorative practices at this board table. There has been information about it in the updates. I know Community Ed is doing some education around restorative practices. So our board was really curious about what restorative practices were looking like in the district in various spaces, some of the approaches that we've been taking as a system to restorative practices. And so that was the focus of our retreat in January. We were really fortunate to have Katrina Poplet come in, one of our restorative specialists, and guide us through that journey. And Jessica Glidden, our American Indian Education Program coordinator, led us through a restorative circle. So just to kind of remind all of us and give anyone who's listening an idea of an option for the retreat and what we've done in the past. Last August, the format was a little bit different. We received updates from members of cabinet who kind of talked about their goals for the year and some of the big projects that they were planning to work on throughout the school year. And then that gave us a chance as a board to align our board goal setting with these things that were, Vision 2031 implementation that was happening throughout the district, and the plans that cabinet leaders were making. And so that I felt that context was really important, so that as we looked ahead as a board to our policy work, we could really be aligning our efforts with our district leaders so that we're all moving in the same direction with Vision 2031. So with that framing, I wanted to engage the board in a conversation about our retreat that will happen in August. We typically start planning it. Dr. Mary Perry-Reed and I have worked together on it. Vice Chair Andreessen has helped us with previous retreat planning. So we'll start that within the next month or so, and in preparation for our August retreat, and wanted to get the board's input this evening. One option would be to do something similar to what we did last year, which would be an update from cabinet and then some work around our board goals. Another idea that's been brought forward, and we already kind of started to put the wheels in motion on this, is our American Indian Parent Advisory Committee requested that the board engage in professional development around the really unique histories and needs and goals of our Native families in the district. And the suggestion from APAC, the American Indian Parent Advisory Committee, was that the board read a book by Anton Truer, who's Indigenous. He's a professor at Bemidji State. And he wrote a book called Everything You Wanted to Know About Indians But Were Afraid to Ask. And so APAC has recommended that as reading for the board. And we are in the process of getting copies of that ordered. So if you have not yet, let Elise know if you'd like a digital or a print copy, please let her know. So I thought that that could be a summer reading project for the board, and then we could discuss it and engage in some further professional development around that at the retreat. So those are two ideas I have coming into it. I'd like to hear your priorities and ideas, and then I think from there we can decide the length of the retreat, where we would want to do it, and then, the all-important question, which is what we want to eat at the retreat. So we'll start with some of your ideas around content.
Chair Bouchard?
Yes.
I just wanted to add on to that professional development idea from APAC. One of the things that was really impactful when Director Hartland and I met with them was every member went around and talked about what their experience with Indian education has been. And I found that really impactful as a board member to hear that firsthand experience. And also they were able to share experiences that their students have had as well. So I'm hoping that I can get videos from them that I can share with the board at the retreat.
That would be wonderful. Thank you. Any other ideas around, whether that cabinet update piece would be helpful, if that's something that you'd like just for context? Typically we have, I shouldn't say started, because, so tonight I'll give a report on our board goal attainment for this year, but during our workshop discussion 2 weeks ago where we talked about our board goal attainment, we kind of started to identify some areas where we still had some work to do, and that will inform our board goal setting for next year. So I think we've already mentally started that process, but we kind of formally start that at the workshop or the retreat in August typically, and so wanted to hear from the board as well as if you would like to start goal setting at that time. And then I think if that's the time that we're going to start doing it, then having that cabinet update is really helpful. So would be curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Chair Bouchard, how much time are we anticipating for the board retreat?
I think it kind of depends on what we want to cover. I don't want us to feel rushed.
Yeah.
So I wanted to hear from you if there are any other professional development pieces or priorities you have, and then we can kind of start to talk about time frame.
Okay. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask if those two things are mutually exclusive, because I have not participated in a summer one, so I don't know the time commitment really that we're looking at for the cabinet type of update. But can both of those things happen?
By both of those things, can you?
You mean having the cabinet update and then having this specific kind of low-key development homework that is done over the summer and some of those thought-provoking pieces that we bring into the...
So we're talking about the Indian education program specific professional development and the cabinet update, which in my mind goes along with board goal setting. So is your question if we can do all of those things?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, yes, the answer is yes. And that will determine, I think, if we end up doing a half-day retreat or more of a full-day retreat, and we can talk about what that looks like. But yes, I think it's absolutely possible to do all of it.
Chair Bouchard?
Yes.
I think for me, personally, I really got a lot out of the more of a deep dive, more subject matter deep dive that we did at mid-year as far as the restorative practices. Sometimes I think like a shallow dive into a lot of content is tougher for me to digest. I really love when cabinet comes to the table individually, but I think trying to hear from all of them in one day can sometimes get to be a bit much, whereas that deep dive into restorative, for me, at least the way my brain works, was probably one of the most valuable pockets of time that we had set aside as a board for me.
That's great to hear. I'm trying to think of how that sort of works with our goal setting. I think if we could identify potentially some deep dive areas that we would want as context before we begin our board goal setting, that could be helpful. I think that this APAC professional development piece will end up being a deep dive, because I think as we get together and start planning it, and if they're willing, members of APAC and some of our scholars, if they're willing to help us with some of these components, I think it's going to become really rich content-wise very quickly and turn into kind of that deep dive situation you're talking about. So I like that idea a lot, and I appreciate hearing your thoughts about how helpful it was, because that's also how my brain works, and I like deep dives too. But what do you think about maybe a really high-level cabinet update? Does that feel less overwhelming, yet still give us the context to set goals?
Yeah.
Chair
I think
Bouchard,
so.
what do you mean by high level?
I guess I mean kind of more general, like if each cabinet member could come up with like 3 goals that they're working on in their area, just so we have that holistic picture of what our leadership team is thinking about doing in the upcoming year, so that as we're thinking through our goals, that those are very much aligned.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, about all the work that the policy committee has done, both on anti-racist and equity-driven policies and on restorative approaches in the discipline policy or student code of conduct. And that all came out of, discussions with cabinet, and things that were being implemented throughout the district.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
I had then a follow-up to that. Regarding our restorative practices, it would be so great to get an update about that, in my opinion. How's that going? What's being done and what are success indicators regarding restorative practices?
Okay.
I'd like
Great.
that update.
Great. I'd say, the more ideas, the better, because even if it doesn't fit into the retreat structure, we can always carry these things forward as workshop topics, early on in the fall, if the board is curious about that. So, yeah, so keep the ideas coming. It's all helpful.
I personally am interested in the topic of community engagement and accessibility, meeting accessibility, and acronym understanding. I don't know.
Acronym understanding.
What?
Yes. I was going to say acronym eradication, but
That'll never happen.
Application.
that'll never
and-
happen.
Yeah. And I guess with regard to the cabinet members, I can completely see why it's, maybe feels, I don't know if not helpful is the right word, but like, oh, that was a lot of topics and a lot of people. However, there may be some people that I'm a board member and possibly never interacted with and never really been involved in that sort of meeting. And so I personally see some value with that, but of course, any of it will be helpful, so I don't have extremely strong feelings about that piece.
So last August, we had lunch and then did an afternoon retreat, and I think it was 4 hours, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah.
It's either 3 or 4 hours. We were able to do a circle to kind of like bring everybody back together and ground everybody in the work, and then received those cabinet updates, and then we started on our board goal setting, which took at least another workshop discussion to complete. So it's not like we completed our board goals that day, but we got a really good framework in place. So we were able to do that in between 3 and 4 hours. I can go back and check if it was, I think it was 4. So I want to be respectful of the board's time as well. This would probably take place on a weekday in August before school starts. So I'm thinking probably that third week. And so wondering if you would prefer a half-day, like a four-hour format, or if you're comfortable with a longer format. And that way, as we start to plan this, you know, we kind of have an idea of what the board's okay with in terms of length.
I like the idea of a half-day.
A half-day?
In order to process everything, because we're just coming back from vacation and, you know, we're going to be getting into everything again, and it's a good refresher, and I really want that fresh in my mind, too.
Other thoughts around length?
What's the weather going to be like that day?
I wish I knew. That and many other things.
95.
It's 95, let's
Humid.
just,
Stay
let's do a
inside.
full day.
In the air,
Yeah.
yes. We did it at the high school last year, 8 in the cafeteria area. Actually, we stayed in the cafeteria area for the whole time because we had access to the screens and technology and all that. But there are other really great spaces at the high school that, you know, are maybe a little more, a little smaller, more comfortable, but would still allow for community members to join us in that space if we have community members who'd like to come watch the retreat. So we could absolutely do it there, but if the board has other ideas about location, would certainly like to hear those.
I would be okay with any duration and location. That's not a huge deal for me. Would you like, if we know, like, for example, I know there's like 2 days in August, that would really be difficult for me. Would you like some assistance in gathering dates, or like how, we don't have to wade into that now, I can help over the summer as well, but.
So Elise can help us determine a date that'll work well for everyone, kind of like we did for our January retreat.
Okay.
So if we're thinking about a half-day, would you prefer a morning or afternoon? And then we could do lunch either way, or would you, if we're doing morning, would you prefer more of a breakfast situation versus lunch?
I prefer afternoons.
Afternoons for Shannon.
I like afternoons, too.
We've got 2 for afternoons. We've got a motion and a second for afternoons.
I don't care, either way,
Steve's flexible.
yeah.
Any other strong feelings either way? Okay, so afternoon, we could start with lunch, have a little social time, and then fall asleep. Just kidding. And then move into our content. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, great. Well, you can expect follow-ups. I'll work with Elise on scheduling, and then as we get closer to the retreat, we'll send out an agenda so you know what to expect. And then, of course, the summer reading book by Anton Truer, which will be great. So anything else on the retreat? Okay, thank you. Next, we'll move into our superintendent goals. This is an opportunity for our community to hear what Dr. Mary Perry Reed has been working on this year in terms of her goals as a leader. After our board meeting this evening, we'll go into executive session to do her performance review. And then, that review is very much centered on these board goals. Superintendent goals. And then at our next board meeting, I'll give a report that summarizes what we discussed during executive session so that the community is aware of that as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Mary Perry Reed.
Thank you, Chair Bouchard. Mr. Warner, are the screens working? Okay. Just in the audience space or up here? I'm using
I was
this.
getting the meat in there, but I'm not getting your computer right now.
Oh, maybe I should plug it in.
Everything went away.
Hold on.
Or you can go wireless.
Do all board members at least have access on their,
Yeah, I have
Screen.
it on my
okay.
iPad here.
So I have plugged in, Steve. I'm just not sure what else I might be doing wrong.
Yeah, I don't know either. Try going wireless. Let's go to the Apple TV.
Sorry, what do you want me to do?
Go to system preferences. System preferences. Displays. That was me, I thought. Okay. So, system preferences. Student, display. Training.
Thanks, Elise.
Okay.
Hey,
Thanks.
Yeah, I think this is a little loose.
Okay. Well, thanks for your patience. So I do have two versions of this goal overview. One is more oriented for our community. And then when we go into closed session this evening, I'll get more granular. I just wanted to be mindful of the different audiences. But at least you as a board will be able to view and listen to both. So, we've had, man, there's so many, all the words actually in this word map describe the year that we've had. I literally spent about 10 minutes just typing in all of the words that came to my mind when I thought about the year that we've had. And I also thought that this was a super appropriate quote because we have used the word resilience quite frequently this year to describe the staff that we serve, to describe our students who have navigated tumultuous times during this year, to describe our leaders who have helped everyone navigate all of these ebbs and flows of a second COVID year, and also I think to describe our parents and families. But resilience is accepting your new reality, even if it's less good than the one you had before, which many of our staff said that this year felt tougher than last year. You can fight it, you can do nothing but scream about what you've lost, or you can accept that and try to put something together that's really good. I inserted the really in there. So I do believe that our staff really came together this year and showed each other, showed all of us, showed our students, showed our families what can be done even in the toughest circumstances. And I'm just really proud to work in this system and to partner with other leaders who are in it for the good, regardless of the challenges that we face. So as you know, and for our community, we organize all of our school board, cabinet level, school level, and leader and department level goals into 6 leadership competency areas. And so learning leadership is the first competency area, and our system goal for that is around moving toward personalized learning that is concept and inquiry based, as well as undergirded by strong wellness and restorative practices in every classroom. So this is early learning and preschool through grade 12 and even into transition plus, and hopefully adult basic education. And really, what we're proud of here in Hopkins is that we are cohering our pedagogical practices, our leadership practices around a learning framework that is specific in identifying what kinds of instructional teaching and learning practices we will embrace in our system and those that we will reject or not include in our system. So for example, we want learning in every classroom that is student, not adult-centered, right? So that's just an example of how explicit we want to be about the practices that we want to see in our classrooms, and all of this is articulated in what we call the Hopkins Learning Framework. I am also very proud of our Innovation, Design, and Learning Department, the members of whom are articulating this learning framework and are working with teachers and teams to identify the instructional and learning, teaching and learning practices that will fall under the 4 pillars of the framework, which you see in this graphic organizer. So instruction and engagement, spaces and places, scholar success metrics, how do we know our students are doing well according to what we say learning needs to look like, and then also curriculum design. And so it's really important to our system that we articulate a clear learning goal that informs what teaching and learning practices will look like across all schools and all classrooms. And then all of our leaders have a responsibility to then articulate a learning goal that aligns with the system learning goal. So my job as the system leader is to partner with our Director of Innovation, Design, and Learning to ensure that we do continue working on iterating and evolving the learning framework to get very granular and identify for teachers, help all practitioners understand what pedagogical practices should look and sound and feel like across all of our spaces, and to make sure that our quality, what we call Tier 1 instruction, which is instruction that every student will receive, is not only academically rigorous, but also has strong wellness and restorative practices, think circles, that are embedded into every classroom. So also within our learning goal is the idea that we will reimagine schools and reimagine learning in all of our spaces. And so we'll get to the innovation goal, but we are engaged in reimagining what learning should look and feel like in all of our spaces. And our schools have done a really great job of identifying themes and ways of learning that are Vision 2031 aligned. So for example, Glen Lake Go and experiential learning at Glen Lake Elementary. For another example, outdoor learning and a focus on environmental education at Gatewood Elementary. Another example is project-based learning, which is interdisciplinary and student-centered, and that's the focus at Meadowbrook. So our schools are doing a really good job of looking at the components and elements of Vision 2031, and then looking at all of the learning possibilities out there in the world. What are the most progressive and the most responsive systems doing for teaching and learning in their spaces, and what are some that we can replicate here, so that we can imagine a new future for ourselves here in Hopkins. So I'm really happy with the progress that we're making in the learning goal space. And one of the things that's really important to us is that we do find ways of including our students and our parents and, of course, our teachers in identifying what, like what that experience will actually look and feel like. So that it's just not people at the top deciding, okay, this is what it's going to be like, and everybody else implement. If we're going to be a flat organization where people are working together to decide what those experiences will look and feel like, then we have to have the folks who will be impacted be also at the table. So any questions about the Hopkins Learning Framework as a focus for the learning system goal? Okay, so I said that there were 6 leadership competencies in our system goal, in our strategic goal plan. The second area is culture leadership. So if you research what are the characteristics of organizations that have strong and positive workplace culture, then you'll see things like a well-articulated vision, you'll see things like articulated core values, a focus on people and the wellness of people within the system. You'll see words such as transparency in decision-making, transparency in communication, and also multiple voices being at the table. So these are things that we care about and have talked about here in Hopkins. And there are a number of activities and experiences that we have facilitated this school year to try to really focus on a culture that conveys caring, that conveys listening and respect, where we're practicing sharing or distributing power, where we're practicing the behaviors that help all people feel as though they are of equal worth. So we have frequent discussions about reducing or flattening our hierarchy and figuring out ways of having multiple and diverse voices at all of our discussion and decision-making tables, with this idea that if we can help all of our stakeholders in our organization feel like they are part of a team, part of a family, part of a community, then we will be on our way toward strengthening our organizational and our workplace culture. So a few examples are listed in the bullets there. We put together a welcome back video that communicated all of our system goals. And the system goals were reflective of Vision 2031, which is a collective vision, which is a vision that was articulated by hundreds, if not thousands of, different pieces of stakeholder input, because we know that clearly communicating what the organization is going to work on is one way of helping people feel included. If they feel informed, they feel included. Another thing that was really exciting in the beginning of the year was the facilitated experience put on by Brave New Workshop. Board members, do you remember that? It was really awesome opportunity where we had a keynote. I think she was in front of us. We also had the in-person option. You could come to Lindbergh to experience it in person, or you could stay in your school or district office space and participate virtually. But this really incredible sort of think keynote / I don't know, she's sort of like an actress, really. Mm-hmm. She put on this kind of like a one-woman show where we all got to experience what a positive and affirming culture might look and feel like if we're all on the same page about what we believe and what needs to happen in the organization. It was very interactive. It was very spontaneous, and I think it did a great job of providing some inspiration for the school year, as well as a collective shared experience to get everybody on the same page. So that was a nice event that we had in August. Quarterly, we've had meetings with union and district leaders at the table. Those are about 90 minutes in length, and then we send out notes to about 45 leaders after that, identifying what folks said is going well in the organization and what needs to be worked on. And we have heard feedback that the individuals who attend those meetings feel like we truly are coming together to not just to acknowledge what's working well, but to be honest about what's not working and where morale still feels low or challenging and what the reasons might be for that. So I think that if we can not only continue to facilitate those experiences, but also like be really creative and outside of the box with how we might partner together around long-term solutioning, I think that will go a long way with the folks at that table and also the rest of our staff. There has been an explicit focus on wellness throughout Hopkins Public Schools this year. We use it in our language, our written and oral language, on a regular basis. Our human resources and benefits experts have identified and communicated opportunities for wellness support to our employees. We also have teams at all of our schools that organize and facilitate wellness experiences or activities for staff. We have implemented circles and circle opportunities in many classrooms across our spaces. So just with how challenging the year has been in terms of health challenges with COVID, or students not feeling connected, or staff feeling stressed or perhaps overworked, we know that we've had to focus on wellness, and I do think that we've attempted that. I think we need to get better at like, for example, if you ask a teacher or maybe any staff member, what is it that you need in order to feel better about your job, to feel better about showing up to work every day? A lot of people will say time. And so we need to think creatively about how to do things differently in a way that yields extra time for people to catch up on work or to be more proactive or to do things differently. So we do have to continue to be creative about how we facilitate wellness opportunities that actually have the impact people are looking for. Another very specific thing that we did that I thought was useful, the only thing is I don't know if all teachers across all buildings use this, but all of our schools have what's called a building instructional leadership team, and we asked the principals to facilitate a discussion with the members of those teams to identify, this was mid-year when things felt really, really fast-moving and challenging. So we said, what can we stop? What are some of the things that we are doing, and we're doing them because we did them last year, or they're built into our behaviors and habits, but they're not necessarily yielding the kind of result or impact we're looking for. What are some of the things that we're doing that we should stop to create space to start behaviors or experiences or practices that would be more useful? So we put together a start and stop document and sent it out to all staff to really give teachers and others permission to stop doing things just, like the types of things that they were doing just because they felt like they had to, right? And so we did hear from people that was useful. I think what was challenging is that we were in the thick of a very fast-moving season, and it really is hard for teachers and staff who care about their performance, care about results, to also find time to, like stop everything, to then focus on a document, to then think about your thinking, to then identify some new practices, right? Like there's a whole process in there that requires time, which, folks struggle to find. And, there were lots of other things I feel that we did to focus on culture, but these are just a few examples. And of course, yesterday we had the end of year party, which, for those of you who attended, we had a lot of people say that was, a great deal of fun, that they could just relax. They weren't going to a meeting after that. They didn't have to prepare anything. The food was free. There were games, right? It was just a really positive and uplifting way to end the school year.
And there were puppies.
And there were puppies.
There were puppies.
Right. And now, apparently, we've set a precedent because we're already getting requests for what needs to be at next year's party, including a water slide. Yes, continue with the puppies, and then some people want it off-site, so there can be some kind of a margarita bar or something like that.
Yeah.
So
That's the after party.
that's your own personal, put together your own personal after party. So any question, I think I went too long on this one. Any questions about culture and what we're trying to work on in that space?
I mentioned the start-stop document to colleagues in other districts, and they found that to be a really compelling idea.
Thank you. We thought so too. And, there's always the two halves of the work. There's the idea, and then there's the implementation of the idea, and what are the conditions that you have to have in place for that implementation to happen and to happen well. So I think it's something that we can continue with greater emphasis on the how. So I mentioned that there are six goal areas in our framework. The third is equity, and our equity goal is that in all of our spaces at the individual, team, district, department, program, school level, we will identify, interrupt, and act against disproportionality, whether it's race-based or based on income, household income, language, as well as any biases in program tracking or pattern discrimination. And so the biggest activity that we engaged in this year, or the most important lever we pulled, was partnering with our equity audit partners, who conducted really a very thorough inventory of where we are with equity and equitable practices in our system. And so our school board was able to hear the findings from that report a few months ago, and the findings and the recommendations, I think, were very hard to hear, because what they said pretty clearly is that we, as a system, we have focused very heavily on professional learning and professional development, but that hasn't translated to equitable practices in all areas. And so being very results-oriented in our approach has to be our continued focus. And we have been thinking about that and have been putting some plans together to be much more results-driven in our leadership and instructional actions moving into next year. So any questions on equity? Okay, so we started with learning, we went to culture, finished equity. The fourth space is innovation. And the backdrop that I wanted to provide for why we have an innovation goal is when we were partnering with Go-Kart Labs. That was our strategic visioning partner as we articulated Vision 2031. They thought it was very important that innovation be a thread in everything that we do. In fact, they said that we need to have a process that everyone follows to identify important problem areas in the district, and then to identify change ideas or potential solutions for those problems, instead of people having a million different ways for identifying problems and solutions. So they helped us build a lab operating system, which is our process for identifying important problems to solve, and then also understanding the root causes for those problems before then articulating potential change ideas. So not only have we been using this lab operating system, for example, we've used it in understanding better the gaps and flaws in our transportation system. Our music and media services departments followed the lab operating system to identify what they need to work on in those departments. We've used it in school leaders and department leaders use the lab operating system in identifying problem areas to focus on for their own system goals, system and school goals. And so it's an important part of our innovation process. And then I also wanted to speak to the real big innovations that we have imagined and either are in the midst of or are implementing here in Hopkins this year, including virtual EDU. So as you know, we needed a way to provide a quality education for families who were not going to come to school this year because of COVID. And so, as you know, we've had 300 families enrolled in virtual EDU, which was built in a year by a team led by Dr. Tiffany and some other, real goal-getters with a very lengthy application to MDE for full accreditation. So the work that team has done to build virtual EDU and also to be fully accredited so that we can open enroll students into our online K-12 school is real tremendous. And it is a true innovation because it will address a niche area that other online programs haven't addressed, such as a focus on social justice, such as being anti-racist in its pedagogical approach, and also focusing on project-based learning. So that's a strong innovation for Hopkins, and we're real proud of that work. To have our two teachers, Lisa and Abby from Eisenhower, who imagined outdoor immersion as a way for students to learn safely in the thick of the pandemic. That was a true innovation last year, which continued into this year, and then Gatewood Elementary has adopted outdoor immersion as their school-wide approach. And so we're really proud of that program. Glen Lake Go, I've already mentioned, with Principal Radel actually driving the blue Glen Lake Go bus to transport students to their off-site experiential learning activities is a wonderful innovation. And then, of course, we are working on launching our collaborative lab school. ThriveEd is our partner, so ThriveEd and Hopkins have partnered together to build a school in which students and engagement guides, here in Hopkins we call them teachers, collaborative lab school we'll call them engagement guides, who will work alongside students to co-design learning for 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. And we hope to start with 60 students co-located here at Eisenhower Community Center coming this fall. So lots of small and big innovations throughout Hopkins Public Schools with the lab operating system as the process that we use to test new ideas. Any questions about that?
What does the implementation of the lab operating system look like on a day-to-day basis? I'm just curious as someone who's not.
That's a good question. I can send you a slide for what the process looks like. It's not really a day, it's not an experience that people have or facilitate every day, but it might be a chunk of time where a team might get together, say a team at the district office or a teacher team at a school, or for example, K-12 music teachers got together for a chunk of time and they followed this process, which I could send you a slide that shows what the process looks like. It starts with empathizing to understand. So you think about the end users. Who are the end users in K-12 music? Well, they are our students who take choir and band and orchestra, right? And what are they experiencing? And, like what do they love and what, what might some of the reasons be for lower enrollment or declining enrollment or experiences that students don't feel are great, et cetera, et cetera. So they follow this lab operating system process to identify the problems that are inherent within the current practice and then to theorize potential solutions to then come up with recommendations that they would implement as a group of teachers or that they, would need help from district leaders to implement. So does that kind of make sense? So it's not really like a daily experience, but it would be a specific process you would follow to move from problem to solution for like a discrete topic or department or something like that.
No, that's a really helpful explanation. I think it's important to understand how these things look to like the people who use them.
Yeah.
From a more outside perspective, outside of
Yeah.
the staff. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think like what we dreamed of is figuring out how everyone, including students, would understand the 6 steps of the lab operating system so that even students could say, okay, we have a problem with opportunity hour. Like, we are going to follow the lab operating system so we can better understand like what the micro problems are, like what are the root causes or the things that are happening to, like yield whatever that bigger problem is, and then how might we do things differently to have a better experience. So it'd be really cool if one day everybody knows that process so that a lot more people are involved in being resourceful and solving their own problems. Does that make sense? Yeah.
I just had a quick question, and you might not know the answer to this yet, but how do students enroll in the collaborative lab school?
So the engagement guides are putting on multiple like info sessions. They've had a ton of meetings in person, virtually, to get the word out. And then there is, if you go to the high school website, under academics, there's a collaborative lab school web page. So there's an interest form there. And also, they could just email their counselor, they could email any teacher, they could email high school administration, or even the staff who work for the lab school and say, I'm interested. And then the first step is like a one-on-one consultation to find out if it's a good fit. Not necessarily, not that the answer will be no, but for students to know whether the program is a good fit for them. And then there's a registration process that follows.
Great, thanks.
Could I? Yeah.
You can go first, it's okay.
Oh, I could just say as a student, I think we've seen a lot of information go out about the collaborative lab school to us. I don't know if Grace, you had.
Yeah, kind of piggybacking off of what Parker had said. We had, I believe, 2 or 3 of my classes had members of the community that were already in the lab school kind of come in and direct students whether that would be a good option and kind of explaining that. I did have a question about if a student chose to enroll. I know at one point they said that it would come across as like an elective, and then they said later that they were working towards it being like not a full-time class, but like a A, B day kind of thing. So I'm just wondering if they landed necessarily on what it would look like transcript-wise.
Okay, I don't actually know what kind of credit it will yield, but I do know that for first semester of next year, it will be one block in the morning, and then students will transition to the more traditional HHS experience for the rest of the day, and then the amount of time in collaborative lab school will increase, I think, to 2 or 3 blocks for second semester.
Okay, cool.
But I'm not sure about the credit.
Okay, thank you.
And maybe there will be 2 or 3 credit options because 3 of the engagement guides that have been hired so far are licensed in 3 different areas.
Got it. Okay.
Okay, so we have 2 goal areas left, and then I'll just try to be fast because it's 6:56. So this 5th one is empathy, and I think what we're going to do for next year is infuse empathy in a couple of the other goals. Empathy is more of a how than a what, we think. The reason why we want to pay attention to empathy in our system, and currently why it's a system goal, is when we were working with community members and stakeholders to identify the characteristics of the Hopkins graduate, a lot of people said that empathy is very important, that students have to know how to engage in perspective taking if they're going to be ready for the world and ready to work on teams and ready to, embrace other people's ideas, et cetera, et cetera. And so then we said, well, if empathy is an important trait of the Hopkins graduate, then it also has to be a characteristic that adults have and model. We also know that it is very useful and helpful in an organization where leaders have empathy for the staff that they serve, where teachers have empathy for the students that they serve. So there's a lot of reasons why empathy is important. It's just that we have to figure out where in our strategic goal sort of framework or map, we have to figure out where it fits. So I'll just leave it at that the way that empathy shows up in our system and in our, sort of focus on being results oriented is that it's a characteristic of the Hopkins graduate, and we know that it's important for leadership, and it's been a very important attribute for us to have as adults this year, and also model for students specifically because of COVID and because we do have a maybe global culture of people being fairly exasperated and maybe somewhat lacking empathy. So how might we, for those reasons, be uber focused on being empathetic and on demonstrating empathy in our system here in Hopkins, because we know it's important for our kids. And then the last one is operational goals. So essentially, we know that we have to find ways of ensuring that people who are doing work in our system are able to get their work done effectively and efficiently. And there's, it's sort of this, I think, common knowledge, perhaps, in all organizations, perhaps more of a focus in governmental entities, school districts where school staff often talk about the district office being, slow or bureaucratic or ineffective, or what they do doesn't match what we do, right? So we're constantly thinking about, well, what does alignment look like? What does it mean to have efficient and effective systems? So we want to have an operational goal focus area so that we can force ourselves to identify the things that are getting in the way of us being efficient, and effective. And so I put in the data points on the right-hand side of the slide, I listed some examples of operational areas in which we have increased either efficiency or effectiveness. For example, hopefully you've seen the magic that William Pierce has done, and in partnership with Lake Country, with Torero support in our transportation system, night and day difference. We are building a strong data system and data infrastructure. We're thinking about resource alignment. We are blending our preschool programs because families said that it was complicated and hard to understand. So there's a lot of things that we're working on the operational side of things, so that when we, if we say that teaching and learning is our most important function in the district, then teachers and school leaders can do their jobs efficiently and well, because behind the scenes, the operations are flowing in a seamless fashion. So that's the purpose of having a focus area on operations. And I'll just stop there because of time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mary Perry Reed. So we'll have an opportunity to discuss each of these goal areas during the executive session following the regular meeting. And I think we should take a little break here before we start that regular meeting. So I'll see you back here at the table at 7:05. This ends our workshop. This meeting of the Hopkins School Board is called to order at 7:07 PM. Our second agenda item is open agenda. This is typically the time when the board takes public comment from members of our community. There are two options for giving public comment. You can leave a voicemail that will be played publicly during the meeting, or of course, you can always join us here in the boardroom and fill out a public comment card and hand it to me before the meeting begins. We received no voicemails this evening, and we do not have any community members with us in the room tonight to give public comment. So we will move on to our student board representatives' reports. We are thrilled to have Grace and Parker with us at the table this evening. And I received an email from Imani with a report that she'd like me to read, which is like such an honor to read Imani's words. So which one of you would like to start? And then I'll finish with Imani's. It's a staring contest. Okay.
All right. So, starting off, obviously the school year has ended and it is now summer. And we're just bringing to light, the Depot in Hopkins has been hosting events throughout the school year. It's been a place of congregation for Hopkins after hours and some parties and such on the weekends. Most recently, they did a Dress as Your Favorite Joe night, in which students would go at a discounted rate with proof of ID, and were encouraged to dress as their favorite Joe, Joey, Joseph, etc., from like any form of media. I'm assuming they are planning to do several more of this sort of party situation. I'm getting a yes from Parker. Throughout the summer, because I'm pretty positive they did last year as well. Yes, okay. So yeah, sophomores are very much excited about that. And then I did also want to highlight that there is going to be a counseling shift, which I'm sure you guys are aware of, within the high school next year. We're shifting away from like counselors based on last name, for example, like A through C or whatever it is goes to this counselor. And instead we're moving towards grade-based counselors. The student body was made aware of this in a royal read, which is like an email that Principal Ballard sends out around the end of May. And this left students wondering why the change was necessary, and because there was so little time in the school year left, at least the sophomore student body was struggling to find answers to their questions. And one of the reasons for that is they were just simply like not even aware who their counselor was going to be next year, so they didn't know who necessarily to reach out to. So we kind of recommend sending an email. I don't know if that happens like on this level or if that's like a Principal Ballard thing, to the parents and the students, providing a reconnect on the counselor issue, and then just saying like, hey, if you're a sophomore next year, this is who your council team is gonna be. And then if you're a junior and a senior, just so that's really clear for all of the students, so they're not kind of left wondering what to do over the summer. And then some news personally, I'll be staying on as a junior representative.
Yay.
So I can't wait to see you guys next year as well. And that is all.
Thank you, Grace. We're so happy that you're going to be joining us next year as well. Your voice has been really powerful and important at the table, and I'm grateful for your continued service.
Thank you.
Parker.
Whoop. For my final student board representatives report, I haven't prepared anything, so this is going to be an adventure.
We like adventures.
Improv.
I'd like to start by thanking all of you for the incredible honor of being able to sit here at this board table and talk to you at the same level. I think that the district in the last 5 years has made leaps and bounds as far as the involvement of student voice in the process of creating and implementing policy. I think there's still a long way to go. That's something I'd like to make clear. There are no it's not wrapped up neatly in a bow, but I think we're getting there, and I see the improvements that are being made in administration throughout the district, and I'm confident that it will keep moving in a better direction. I'd say that there are still some major problems that I see in the district. We're amazing at communicating our broad goals, but very poor at communicating day-to-day changes that families need to know about. That's a big, big issue, especially at the high school level. And I would say the other big area that has to be tackled, and that, I mean, we've done amazing work with it, but we need to continue to do more with equity. And I know that all of you are invested in this, and that all of you also want to see this happen. And so I'm also very optimistic on that front. I know that you guys can get more done through practices like restorative justice when you're deliberate and careful and thoughtful in your implementation. I think there are great things, especially in equity, that can be gleaned through listening to students. And I think that we're almost there. It's coming along. Yeah, and I'd like to close by just saying it's been an amazing chance to serve alongside all of you. I think that the student board rep program also needs some improving. I'm excited that Director Khan will be working on that next year. But I think that we're moving in a direction of representing more and more of the student body as best we can, because we really do have a very impactful voice on district policy. And I'm very excited for you guys to continue that reputation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Parker, for that honest and I believe accurate assessment of where we're at as a system, and the reminder to us as leaders of the importance of that work, and that we need to keep pushing in all of the directions that you've indicated. You have been a force for change through your work at this board table with the policy committee, the advocacy work you've done, and we are going to miss your voice and your clarity very much. And just wish you all the best, and please do not be a stranger. Come give public comment. Just kidding. You totally should, but also we'd like to see you back in the district whenever you're here and want to visit us. And we just are excited to see what comes next, because I know it's going to be great for you. Thank you. So I will read Imani Karimongi's statement that she sent. She is in Kenya right now with her family, and asked me to read this as her board representative report. These are Imani's words. Despite the fact that I have not been a part of the student school board program for as long as previous participants, I believe I have gained nearly as many heartfelt memories and valuable experiences during my time in it. Thinking back to 10th grade, a year before I even heard about the student school board representative program, I had no intention of ever taking on such an intricate yet fulfilling position. While I had been involved in a variety of student government and leadership activities, I rarely stepped outside my comfort zone to put the skills I had gained through those activities to good use. Junior year is when I finally took this huge step. Receiving the email about the program, reading it, signing up for an interview, being interviewed, and taking on a 2-year position were all just the beginning of a new adventure. The theme of this evening. Since my junior year, I've learned more about referenda, though I still need to learn more about them. They haven't quite clicked. advocacy and its powerful impact when used correctly, and the value of making connections. To be honest, having all these skills will undoubtedly benefit me in the future, but meeting new people was the only way I was able to develop them in the first place. Through this program, I not only got to work closely with representatives who shared my goals, but I also got to help new ones get acclimated to the schedule while also having enough time to collaborate with board members and other community members. Thank you so much to all of the student school board representatives for being such resilient, outspoken, and open-minded individuals. While this program still has so much more to look forward to, I still feel like you all made it fun and worthwhile for me. I truly hope the same for you. Thank you to everyone on the school board, especially those on the LAC, for becoming familiar faces on whom I could rely for any questions I had, especially during the budget season last year. Thank you to Chair Bouchard, Director Khan, and Superintendent Mary Perry Reed for being so encouraging and supportive, especially this year, as I feel like I've really gotten to know you all on a personal level, making my time here feel even more special. Thank you to each and every single board member for allowing us students to take part in these meetings in order to make our school an inclusive and comfortable environment. I wish all of you the best, and thank you again. I hope to come back and say hi sometime in the future. Imani. Well, thank you, Imani, for sending that and for the honor of reading it. And you have been such an incredible leader. You have such a calm, measured, and passionate leadership style that will surely be missed. You have a way of creating community that I have personally learned from. And we can't wait to see what comes next for you because we are confident it is going to be great. So thank you. Okay, we will now move on to our superintendent's report with Dr. Mary Perry Reed.
Thank you, Chair Bouchard, and good evening to board members, student board reps, and colleagues, as well as audience members or people viewing. Today is our teachers' last day. Students' last day was on Friday. Commencement was last Thursday. And I don't know if it's like this in other fields or industries, but I feel like in public school, on the last day, you feel like August was just a couple days ago. So it, especially this year, was just a whirlwind of an experience, definitely one for the history books. In fact, I was talking with a retired teacher yesterday, and we were saying we should write a book about the last 2 years. So anybody out there who's interested in co-authoring the Hopkins Public Schools 2-year experience through COVID and everything else, would be an interesting venture. But we need to find time for that. So I'm really happy to report that graduation was a wonderful success. I know that behind the scenes there were 536 seniors to get to get organized into orderly lines for the procession, but from the observer and audience standpoint, it looked really well organized, and it was a really beautiful ceremony. Our MCs for the event were Emma Cohen-Pesh and our very own Imani, Carrie Mongi, and they did a fantastic job just, keeping everyone engaged and knowing what was happening throughout the commencement exercise. There were 44 flags that adorned one side of the stage with the orchestra on the other side. We heard from the orchestra and also Midori, which is a treble a cappella ensemble. I think there were 5 or 6 young women who were singing in that group that afternoon, excuse me. It was a 12 o'clock ceremony. And then our student speakers were Angel Riley and Toby Saunders, and they did a really great job. And I just thought overall it was a marvelous ceremony, lots of conversations and gatherings outside of Mariucci, post the event with families taking pictures, and it was a glorious day. It was just wonderful. So congratulations to all of our Hopkins High School 2022 graduates, and thanks very much to the staff and HHS admin for coordinating the event and allowing all of us to be a part of it. There are many end-of-year activities at all of our schools. I wanted to highlight one, although all of them have been fantastic, but here at Eisenhower Community School on May 26th, there was an evening event, which I think they call their cultural festival. And I'm not sure if you were able to attend, but Miss Dickerson is the art teacher at Eisenhower Elementary, and she said it took her and 3 other staff about 5 hours to post hundreds of pieces of student art on multiple hallway spaces throughout the building. It was beautiful. It really, were you there, Chair Bouchard?
it was amazing.
Stunning. Yeah, you looked at the art and you literally felt like you were in a professional gallery. It was really, really stunning. And then, of course, there were many activities for students and families. I'm glad that a lot of people were wearing masks because, honestly, I think there were hundreds of kiddos and families there. It was really packed. But there were games and student displays in the gym, also student performance in the auditorium, and I was just really proud of the staff and all of the student helpers for putting together a great end-of-year experience for families. Also wanted to share with board members in our community a wonderful event that happened on May 22nd at Hopkins High School. You may have heard that our outgoing Director of Athletics and Activities, Dan Johnson, hosted a Hopkins Hall of Fame recognition ceremony. So there were 6 individuals who were inducted into the Athletic Hall of Fame, and then there were 9 staff who were recognized for their distinguished and many years of service. And so many of the individuals, let's see, let me look at the list. About half of the individuals inducted into the Hall of Fame were former students of Hopkins. And so it was a really nice event where I personally learned a lot about the history of the city of Hopkins, the community of Hopkins. There were many people in the audience, I think in their 80s and 90s, and just, like really sort of bleeding blue throughout that whole space. So it was really nice to meet a lot of those individuals who have been contributors to the culture and experience of Hopkins and Hopkins Public Schools for a very long time. It was really nice. And then I spoke earlier during the workshop about our end-of-year party. So I think we had about 500 staff who came to our end-of-year party yesterday in the parking lot of Hopkins High School. And I am very grateful to parent Jen Hoyska, who was our chief organizer, for the experience. Jolene and Communications and Marketing also put in a lot of time helping to coordinate this event. We also had help from Buildings and Grounds and our facilities staff from Nutrition Services. And many parents contributed financially to support the food trucks, to give staff prizes. We had a puppy corner, we had a DJ, we had MCs. It was a beautiful day, and we were also able to recognize 44 retirees. Those are some of the individuals in the left-hand picture there. So it was a really nice event, and I mentioned earlier that folks are already asking what next year's end of party is going to be like. So we'll have to start planning perhaps in December for that. And then just a couple of additional photos from graduation. On the left, you see the sparkly streamers. So right after we handed out all of the diplomas, I think those were those teachers who,
Yeah, it was
Through
the
the street.
people at the end of each row.
yeah, it was beautiful.
You loved that.
I loved
You
it.
gasped.
I did. Yeah, well, I wasn't sure, what noise that was. You're always hoping it's, not something dangerous. But it wasn't anything dangerous. It was just, what do you call those anyways?
Streamers?
Yeah, they're streamers, but you shoot them out, and then all of a sudden there are,
Cannons.
what do you call them?
Confetti
Cannons?
cannon?
Yeah, confetti cannons. Yes, that's
There we
right.
go.
Well, it was stunning. It was beautiful. And were you surprised?
No,
Or
they
did you-
They had told us in advance
Oh,
about that
they
part.
did.
Yeah.
Okay.
We were
Just to
surprised.
tell the superintendent.
Oh, I see. Well, it was great. And then picking up all those streamers from the floor afterward, yeah, that took a long time.
Worth it.
Worth it. Okay. And Elise, do we have a video coming up now? Okay, so this will be our last slide. And so I don't personally know how many years we've had this tradition, but we organize all of the seniors to visit the elementary schools they attended. And then they put their caps and gowns on, and they go to the elementary schools and do a senior walk and do fist bumps and high fives with the kids and connect with their former teachers and staff, and it's really, really beautiful. So here's a video showing that.
First teacher ever.
Thank you, Elise.
Thank you, Dr. Mary Perry Reed. Love that video. Great choice to end on that. So with that, I would look for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved?
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next, I would look for a motion to approve the consent calendar.
So moved?
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next, we'll move to our treasurer's report with Treasurer Adams.
Thank you, Chair Bouchard. This first report of the month always includes the enrollment report, and the enrollment for the month of May declined by 37 students from the month of April, which also had a decline of 37 from the previous month. And 25 of those students were elementary for the month of May, 12 were secondary students. And we ended the year with 163 fewer students than we started with on October 1st. And that's a 2.4% decline. 91 of them were elementary students and 72 of them secondary students. We usually experience a decline in enrollment from the first of the year, school year to the end of the school year, but this one was greater than normal. And I don't know to what you attribute that, but I think we need to look into that. Expenses of note this time included $54,600 in transportation aid to private and religious schools for 260 resident students who attend those schools. So, little known fact that state law, section 123B.92, requires that public schools reimburse private schools and parochial schools for transportation of any residents of their district who attend those schools. So I don't know when this started. I looked it up on this state website, and it was amended in 1996, I believe. So it apparently started even before that point. But it's amazing to me how much aid, financial aid, that public schools are required to give to private and religious schools. And I sometimes question whether it's constitutional or not, but it's in the law. So in addition to the aid that we gave to private and religious schools, we also wrote a check for $158.26 to one parent for homeschool supplies for the homeschooling that they do for their student. We paid nearly $273,000 to District 287 for services rendered in the month of April. We spent $21,771 for letters materials. Letters is LTRS, and it's been very strongly advocated for by certain senators at the state level to make it statewide. And I'm not that familiar with all of the content of that curriculum, but we use it in Hopkins, and almost to the tune of $22,000 for materials. In addition, we had a $420 payment to an adult education instructor for a belly dancing class. So if anyone wants to take belly dancing, it's available to you. $269,475 for regular and special transportation for the first 2 weeks of May. And earlier in the calendar, we approved the consent calendar, and it included a list of all the gifts that the district has received from January through June. And I just want to acknowledge the very generous gifts that many people gave, some very generous ones for the staff party yesterday, and from individuals and companies that have a relationship with our district. So I want to publicly thank them. So with that, I move that we approve total disbursements in the amount of $3,208,862.01 for the period May 18, 2022 through May 31, 2022.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the treasurer's report. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you, Treasurer Adams. Next, we'll move on to new business. I'd like to welcome our Ltfm team to the table, and as they're coming forward, I'll turn it over to Dr. Mary Perry Reed.
Thank you, Chair Bouchard. So at our last board meeting on May 24, our Director of Business Services, Turo Chapanduka, and our Supervisor of Buildings and Grounds, Kevin Newman, along with our partners from SiteLogic and Ehlers, presented information on the long-term facilities maintenance plan, which we usually refer to as LTFM. This plan does need to be adopted by our school board, and approved by the Commissioner of Education. And so following this brief recap of the presentation from last time, we would be seeking the approval of our 10-year Ltfm plan, which we do update annually. And welcome to the board table, Torero and Kevin.
Thank you, Dr. Mary Reid. Good evening, Chair Bouchard. Good evening, respective board members. As alluded by the superintendent, we did come to the board about 2 weeks ago with an initial plan for our 10-year list, which we do on a yearly basis as required by Minnesota Department of Education. What we did when we brought the initial plan, we came up with a plan which had a 2-year cycle of about $32 million. We went back and did some refinement and took out close to about $6 million, just putting into perspective what's going on in our economy and not wanting any significant impact to our taxpayers. Through some of the work we've done with our project manager, SiteLogic, as well as our bond advisory, ELAS. So that's the plan we have at the table. The second portion of this is the approval of the Ltfm plan for District 287. Since we are a member District with 287, we do have a portion which is supposed to be accounted for by the district when it comes to their long-term facility maintenance. So that's the other resolution we have to bring to the table. So what we have here is a plan of about $24.9 million based on the work we've done in the last week, refining our capital projects plan. And this is for fiscal year and calendar year 23 and 24. And I have with me Kevin. Don't know if the board has any questions. We can address some of those.
Well, thank you very much for joining us again and for the detailed presentation 2 weeks ago that gave us really great context for the vote that we're about to take this evening. I think, a reduction in spending is wise and certainly has my support, given, as you said, Director Chapanduka, what we anticipate to be continued challenging economic conditions. So no questions from me specifically, but would like to open it up to my board colleagues. And if you're ready to vote, considering that we discussed this 2 weeks ago, you can let me know that too.
So make a motion to approve the long-term facilities maintenance.
Right, so we have 2 pieces that we need to vote on this evening. Director Chapanduka, was there anything further that you wanted to say about the District 287 resolution, or I know that we have to vote on 2 separate resolutions. I understand that part, but just want to know if the board's ready to vote on both of those resolutions, or if we should, if you have any questions about the separate District 287 resolution.
The context I can probably just give for District 287, they came up with a plan of selling $4.9 million in bonds. The portion for the district is actually divided into 2. There is $15,048.35, which is the pay-as-you-go, and then there is $82,744, which is their debt service, for a total of $97,792.35. That's what the board will be voting on.
Excellent, thank you. Questions or comments from my board colleagues?
Chair Bouchard.
Yes, Director Adams.
Terrell, I just have a question about the 287 LTFM budget. It's approximately 98 million. Is this for on an annual basis, or is this just a one-time expenditure?
So the $97,000 is on an annual basis going into the future, because this is a new bond they are selling. So every year they always come. So we pretty much contribute close to about $100,000 on a yearly basis between their pay-as-you-go as well as their debt service.
All right. Thank you.
Other questions or comments regarding either of the resolutions, so the 270 or the 287? I would welcome a motion for the first resolution, and Clerk Peterson's going to be busy this evening, so.
I move that that we accept the long-term facilities maintenance resolution.
So I have a motion that the board approve the 10-year long-term facilities maintenance plan. Is there a second?
Second?
I have a motion and a second that the board approve the 10-year long-term facilities maintenance plan. Any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote. Man,
You could
like
make a
autopilot. No, I can't.
All right. Well, I'm going to keep you guys on your toes tonight. You never know what order they're going to come.
Ooh, this will be
Okay.
fun.
Director Adams,
Aye.
Vice Chair Andreessen,
Aye.
Chair Bouchard,
Aye.
Director Kahn,
Aye.
Director Ross,
Aye.
Director Hartland,
Aye.
Director Peterson. Aye.
Thank you, Clerk Peterson. We have 7 ayes, 0 nays. Motion carries. Next, I would look for a motion that the board approve the resolution on District 287 long-term facilities maintenance budget and the portion of the allocation to be shared with the school district.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second?
I have a motion and a second for the board to approve the resolution on District 287 LTFM and the portion allocated to be shared with the school district. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Clerk Peterson.
Director Ross,
Aye.
Director Peterson. Aye. Director Kahn,
Aye.
Director Hartland,
Aye.
Chair Bouchard,
Aye.
Vice Chair Andreessen,
Aye.
Director Adams.
Aye.
Thank you. We have 7 ayes, 0 nays. Motion carries. Thank you to our entire LTFM team, including our subject matter experts who joined us in the audience in case there were questions. Really appreciate your work on this, for joining us 2 weeks ago and again this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Director Chapanduka, we're excited that you get to stay with us a little bit longer here. I'll turn it back over to Dr. Mary Puri-Reed to introduce the adoption of the fiscal year 2022-2023 budget.
Thank you, Chair Bouchard, and thank you for staying with us, Director Chapanduka. So our annual budgeting process for this year, well, you know, Teruro's always busy at work with the budget, but formally the engagements with the school board began in mid-December when Director Chapanduka led the discussion to start identifying fiscal parameters and programming suggestions from the school board. We then had some school board workshops and also sessions with the Citizens Financial Advisory Committee in order to inform the predictable staffing model and the district budget. And Director Chapanduka has since presented the preliminary budget. And on May 24, the school board adopted the fiscal year 22-23 budget in first read. And so Director Chapanduka, thanks for being here to present any updates to our school board, and we will be seeking board approval for the budget in second read.
Thank you, Dr. Mary Perrid. Again, good evening, Chair Bouchard, respective board members and the community. What I have here is not really significantly different from what we presented at the last board meeting on May 24th. And I know information has kind of been changing as we get more details from Minnesota Department of Education on some of the different allocations. I'll just give a high-level summary of some of the changes which have happened. There's not been any changes with our general fund allocation. So as I presented on May 24, our total general fund revenue and expenditures, which structural balanced, was $113,042,523. So that allocation remains the same. And then move on to food services. Again, the allocation remains the same. What was presented at the first read was a budget of $4,126,378. That remains the same. Community education, what was presented was $9,360,254. That remains the same. Debt service, there's kind of been a slight decrease from what we presented at the previous meeting, just because of the structural changes we have made with our capital projects plan. So what I have is $16,168,139. The difference is about $100,000 from what I presented last time. There's been a significant reduction on the capital projects just because of the updated plan we presented to the board with Ltfm. So the budget initial, when I presented it, was a little over $80 million. With the adjustments we made, I have our capital projects for fiscal year 23 sitting at $11,757,194. This is just the component of the projects which will take place in fiscal year 23. So with that said, our total budget for the district across all the different funds is $154,454,488, which is a reduction of about $6 million from what I presented in the May 24th. That's just the significant difference between what was presented and what we are bringing forth to the board tonight. And I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Director Chapanduka. As you noted, no major changes from what we approved at our last meeting, which was on May 24th and first read. So no questions from me, just gratitude, continued gratitude to you and your team for coming forward with a structurally balanced budget that will continue to allow us to move forward on those Vision 2031 priorities, and which reflects the really challenging economic conditions that have been thrust upon public schools by our state leaders and our federal leaders. So appreciate your conscientious fiscal leadership. Questions or comments from my board colleagues?
Chair Bouchard,
Yes, Director Adams.
I echo your concern about unpredictable funding from our state and federal leaders, and it pains me that they were able to finish their session without making any major contributions to health and welfare and education of our citizens in this state. I'd like to see them come back in a special session. But I think we've talked about our budget. I know I've been I've been working on it since last August, so I've heard enough, I think, about the challenges. And I would recommend that we approve the fiscal year, I would move that we approve the fiscal year 22-23 budget in second read.
I have a motion to approve the fiscal year 2022-2023 budget in second read. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the fiscal year 2022-2023 budget in second read. Is there any further discussion?
I had a quick question, Chair Bouchard. So just regarding gas prices, which are seemingly skyrocketing, has that been taken into consideration?
Thank you, Director Khan. Yes, we did take some components into consideration, but again, I mean, as you can see, when you start to look at the consumer price index, things are fluctuating. There's talk about, going into a recession. So we did put into consideration factors. We had some kind of concrete conclusions at the point in time when we're developing the budget. What's going to happen in the future, I'm not sure, so we'll just have to come back to the board and update you as we start to see any shifts or any significant increases in on the inflation index. But we did factor in some different inflationary components between our purchase services, supplies, the energy components, which is gas is part of, utilities, all those factors. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Director Khan and Director Chapanduka. Is there any further discussion? So I have a motion and a second to approve the fiscal year 2022-2023 budget in second read. Last call, any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you, Director Chapanduka.
Thank you.
Thank you, Truro.
Next, we'll move on to staffing resolutions. We will invite Assistant Superintendent Lightfoot to the table, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Mary Perry-Reed.
Thank you, Chair Bouchard, and welcome, Dr. Lightfoot. So as you know, March, April, and May are very busy staffing months, and I think we are all indebted to the staffing wizards who are housed in our Human Resources Office, Nick and Brady and team, and we're also thankful to our school board for paying attention to the staffing process and the resolutions that need your special eyes. And tonight we're seeking that you adopt a resolution regarding an unrequested leave of absence, and Dr. Lightfoot can explain more.
Most certainly. Good to be with you this evening. Thank you for the opportunity. This is the last in the series of staffing resolutions that we have. This is an unrequested leave placement. As you'll recall, there has been a period of time which we give the individual or individuals who would be placed on unrequested leave an opportunity to raise any challenges or any concerns. And if so, we address those prior to bringing this forward to you. So at this time, we have not received any additional information or challenge. As you know, we continue to work on our staffing throughout the course of the summer. And if anything changes, there are specific terms and conditions about bringing employees back as soon as we're able. And so tonight's action formalizes this placement and, in addition, then triggers, if you will, the contract so that we now follow the recall terms that are outlined there. So with that, would look for resolution approval by the board and am open for any additional comments or questions that might be helpful.
Thank you, Dr. Lightfoot, and thank you for the explanations and context that you've given us throughout this staffing resolutions process, that if members of our public are following along in the agenda, you see that this conversation began on March 1st. And so it's been certainly a process, as Dr. Mary Perry-Reed said, our human resources and staffing wizards have been working on, and is a difficult process as well. And Dr. Lightfoot has spoken, and Director Adams have both spoken so eloquently about that in the past. So thank you. Any questions or comments from the board?
I do have one question. And I see on a daily basis, we kind of get emails regarding open positions that are within Hopkins schools, and they're across subject matter and across buildings. And I wonder, do the people who are on these lists that we've had to look at, do they have to go through this process and then specifically reapply? Like, what is the process for utilizing some of our talented staff that wouldn't choose, to not return to Hopkins and utilizing them in other.
Yeah, in part, that's why we do the promotion that we do that you speak of through our electronic mail system as well as through our posting system, so that individuals have the opportunity to express interest and be considered for those positions. So by all opportunity, yes, they do. And in part, it's all based on an individual's interest and seeing if that would match with their skills and talents and what they're looking for with the work that they want to be doing.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? With that, I would look for a motion that the school board adopt this resolution regarding the placement on unrequested leaves of absence of certain continuing contracts effective with the end of the 2021-2022 school year.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt the resolution regarding the placement on unrequested leaves of absence of certain continuing contracts effective with the end of the 2021-2022 school year. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll turn it over to Clerk Peterson.
Director Adams,
Aye.
Chair Bouchard,
Aye.
Vice Chair Andreessen,
Aye.
Director Kahn,
Aye.
Director Ross,
Aye.
Director Hartland,
Aye.
Director Peterson, aye.
Thank you. I have 7 ayes, 0 nays. Motion carries. Thank you, Dr. Lightfoot.
Thank you.
Next, we'll move on to our board goal attainment. So at our May 24th workshop, we discussed our board goals for this year, and we really paid attention to the measurable impact section of the board goals. So if you're watching via the YouTube live stream, you can go to the school board page on the district website. There's a tab at the bottom that says board goals. And under each goal, you'll see key actions and measurable impact. And we're really concerned with the impact because we want to make sure that we are achieving these goals and that the actions that we take as a board really impact our system in ways that bring us closer to Vision 2031. So I'll summarize the conversation that we had on the 24th, again, focusing on this measurable impact piece. So goal area 1 is our calendar and schedule equity. I'd like to especially thank our student board representatives and students across the district for their advocacy and their work in this particular goal area. So our accomplishments included changing our calendar to move toward religious and cultural equity. So next year's calendar reflects more Jewish and Muslim holidays. And we received quite a bit of attention for that. There were 3 school districts that I know of that made that change this year to approve calendars for next year to include more Jewish and Muslim holidays. And we are proud to be among them. We also experimented with some scheduling components, namely our late starts on Fridays, which was a lab concept, right? So we're still learning and refining that work and that particular schedule change. We did work around changing start times using a data-driven approach to make that decision. And as our student board reps talked about at the last meeting, this idea of opportunity hour and how that has been impactful in terms of scheduling. Just a note to make, one of the measurable impact items was that the board will make necessary policy changes to support calendar and schedule equity implementation. There's more that we can do, but we are really hemmed in and constrained by state statute. And so as we look to further changes we might want to make, one direction we might head is advocacy, either working through our LAC and I should say in collaboration with other school boards and districts to adjust our state statutes so that we can achieve more of these equitable changes in terms of calendar and scheduling. Goal area number 2 is aligning our budget with Vision 2031. So we just approved our final budget, which was one of the major measurable impact items. So we identified a growth area here under this goal area, talking about combining our budget conversations and education in terms of educating our community about the budget process with advocacy training. So looking at interfacing more with our LAC so that we're not only educating community members about the budget, but we're also providing them with tools to advocate to their state and federal representatives for this public education funding that districts across the state of Minnesota so desperately need. So some ideas, specific ideas that came out of that are, really engaging our students in this process. We have so many brilliant students who are working, working toward financial literacy, probably possess greater financial literacy than I do, and are really good at communicating about complex financial topics. And so looking at this idea of having students intern within the business office, potentially creating short videos describing components of public school finance to our larger community. So I think that could be a really exciting direction for next year. Goal area 3 is really focused on the work of our policy and monitoring committee that has just had such a heavy lift this year and has done it so gracefully and holistically. And so I'm going to turn it over to Vice Chair Andreessen, who heads up that committee, to talk through some of the measurable impact areas for goal area 3.
Thank you, Chair Bouchard. We did some great work this year, and in particular, I was very happy to have student rep, board rep on the policy committee with us because it just lends a very distinct voice that's directly impacted by our policies. So quick update, one of the measurable impacts was policy 102, which is the equal education opportunity policy. We were to make this policy more robust and less risk adverse. And we did do that through creating and adopting a racial equity policy that is anti-racist. And we did that in partnership with students, staff, and community, seeking input and getting it from all stakeholders. The second policy that was listed out was policy 506, student conduct and discipline policy. Replace the current policy's punitive and authoritative practices with restorative ones, which was a direct charge from our student advisory. We have begun work on that in the policy committee. We did review it. The general consensus after looking at it a few times was that this is going to take a lot of work and is going to need to be revised pretty heavily if we are going to meet that lofty and very appropriate goal. So we have been working in a cohort led by the Minnesota Department of Education staff, and it is comprised of staff and community members, including student and parent voice, to transform that policy to be more restorative in nature. We have had 3 meetings and will continue to meet. We are now in the space that we are actively revising that policy in specific ways. And then we did some work based on the equity audit report that was submitted to the school board and have adopted a new equity lens that we use to review all our policies. We did not review specifically policy 522 because there were no federal changes that came down. We were anticipating that. It didn't happen. So we will wait until that happens to revise that policy and have it align more closely with our gender inclusion policy.
Thank you, Vice Chair Andreessen. I'm making a note that we might want to look at policy 522 as we're doing our goal setting for next year. If we anticipate that those changes are coming down, that we can include that. In goal area 3, if we decide to adopt a similar goal area that continues to focus on policy. So appreciate that update. And then we'll move on to goal area 4, which is our new board member orientation and culture building. So we were so fortunate to welcome 2 new board members in January. And I mentioned earlier during the workshop that we held a board retreat in January where we started to do some of that culture identification and culture building work. We were really focused on restorative practices, had the opportunity to engage in a restorative circle, and then learn more about how restorative practices are being implemented throughout the district. During our workshop, Director Peterson commented that she really appreciated that content deep dive. I did too, and I also appreciated the opportunity to build culture by actually practicing some of these restorative approaches together as a board. And I think that there's a lot more that we can do to continue in that area. We did some important policy and implementation work around clarifying board agendas. And so I think that goes along with this idea of shared culture and practices. We created a board training manual that can evolve over time. It's formatted as a Google Doc so that we can link to it. It's very iterative. As we find new resources, we can easily add those. So I think that was time well spent, and that will be a resource that will serve us well moving into the future. And our new board members participated in so much onboarding, both internally and then through MSBA, and did some incredibly hard work in that area. And then we had a mentoring program too, so that our new board members continued to receive that support over time. So that ends my update on our board goals. Is there anything that I missed that my board colleagues would like to add? So this was a report to our community. There is no action that needs to be taken by the board. So if you are satisfied with that report, we can move on.
I do have one question.
Sure.
You had mentioned a couple places where you see either additional opportunity, like for example, working with students hand in hand regarding some of our community engagement pieces, and also revisiting policy 522, and maybe even this like new board member orientation. Are these pieces that you see us able to still work on our August or early next year agenda, so that we carry those with us? And
Yeah, absolutely. I think any of the growth areas that we identified during that May 24th conversation provide a great starting point for that goal-setting process in August. So I agree with you that that'll be helpful for us.
yeah, because I agree with some of the some of the things that you said, where we still have things to do and have found information that should inform us moving forward, and
Absolutely.
make sure we don't leave those behind.
Absolutely. Great. Anything else on this item? Okay, so our next agenda item is a resolution calling for executive session, and this is so we can conduct our superintendent's year-end review. During the workshop, Dr. Mary Perry Reed went over her goals for this year so that our community has a sense of what we'll be talking about when we do this review. And then at our next board meeting, I will provide a summary of what we discussed during the executive session. So this is a resolution, so I'm going to err on the side of caution and have us do a roll call vote, also because I know Clerk Peterson likes it. So I will read the resolution, and then I will ask for a motion to approve. It is hereby resolved that the School Board of Independent School District 270, Hopkins, Minnesota, meet in executive session to conduct the superintendent's year-end review for the 21-22 school year. that the meeting be held in person, and that it commence immediately following the adjournment of this regular meeting. Further, that it be noted that all board members, superintendent, and clerk were duly notified of the intention to call this executive session. So I would look for a motion to approve this resolution.
So, second.
Great, that was easy. I have a motion and a second to approve the resolution. Any discussion? Seeing none, Clerk Peterson.
Thanks, Chair Bouchard.
Anytime.
You didn't sound sincere.
Director Adams.
Aye.
Vice Chair Andreessen.
Aye.
Chair Bouchard.
Aye.
Director Hartland.
Aye.
Director Kahn.
Aye.
Director Ross.
Aye.
Director Peterson. Aye.
Thank you, Clerk Peterson. We have 7 ayes, 0 nays. Motion carries. Next, we can move into board member reports. Who would like to go first?
I have a quick one, Chair Bouchard.
Great, thank you, Director Kahn.
So I got to know our student board representatives on a one-on-one level. We were with Imani, and she led our discussions, and it was just really great to listen to all our students' contributions and what they want to see in the future. One of the things the students brought up is that they'd like to know our board members better, and if it would be possible for them to attend any workshops in order to get to know everyone. And they would like to give their input in that way, get to find out what our views are, et cetera. And I thought that was a great suggestion.
Thank you, Director Kahn.
Yeah.
Who would like to go next?
I can go.
Great, thanks, Director Hartland.
As was mentioned earlier, there's many end-of-the-year events, and I was fortunate enough to attend several, such as the scholarship night, which was really kind of a testament to how Hopkins is a strong-knit community and keeps supporting and investing in its students. I feel like I'm really in the spotlight. I'm like, nature is really wanting me to be highlight right now. Another thing that I was able to do recently was that I participated in the graduation ceremony, not only as a board member, but as an American Sign Language interpreter. And I mention it not only because it was a great honor and I was happy to be there, but it also is a fantastic way to further engage with the community. And I specifically wanted to highlight that it is a fantastic example of Hopkins really living its values. And I wanted to give a special shout out to Atlantis, Wigfall, Principal Crystal Ballard, and Dr. Mary Perry Reed, because they engaged a team of interpreters, so they followed best practices for providing kind of true accessibility to the event. They provided details and speeches down to the complete wording that the interpreters would need to be producing during the event. And Hopkins really kind of in this instance did everything right. I have certainly experienced the opposite. For example, I have recently interpreted another ceremony where I found out about it about an hour in advance, where someone had not done the proper preparations at that school district, and so they left their students and the families who require those services foundering and not sure if they'd be able to participate in their own ceremony. And so I think that, again, I just wanted to thank Hopkins School District for making all of those preparations, for doing that work, because it's not easy. There's a lot of things going on at the end of the school year, so I can see how things would be missed, but it is really an example of Hopkins in real life.
Thank you, Director Hartland, and it was really wonderful to watch you work. You've talked about your passion for interpreting, and it was exciting to have you do it at the graduation ceremony.
It was really cool.
Yeah. I'll go next.
Wonderful, thanks,
All
Director
right.
Adams.
Like all of you, I attended many of those recognition ceremonies and graduations, so I won't detail those. But I did attend a wrap-up AMSD meeting following the completion or non-completion of the legislative session at the Capitol on, this was on May 27th, and we had a debrief of the legislative session by Adosh Uni and Terry Yetter of the Minnesota Department of Education. And just went over some of the, mostly it was talking about what did not pass in this last session, unfortunately. But they did cover a couple of items that did pass in the session. Following that, we had an LAC meeting and agreed that we would all write emails to the governor, to the majority leader in the House and the majority leader in the Senate, to try and encourage them to have a special session. And I think, unfortunately, at least in the Senate, it's fallen on deaf ears. I just saw in an email this morning from the Minnesota School Boards Association that the Senate Majority Leader Jeremy Miller has basically disappeared. So it's not responding to any request for an extra session, and it seems unlikely that that's going to happen, unfortunately. And it doesn't affect just education. There's a bonding bill that should be considered and is just lying there right now, and a whole lot of things. There's a lot of unfinished business that's still over there. I would also like to bring to the attention of the board and our public that, and I heard this on the radio today too, but I also got it in an email from the Minnesota School Boards Association, that a study was recently done by the American Enterprise Institute and the College Crisis Initiative at Davidson College regarding the effect of the COVID pandemic on public schools. And what they found in the national survey is that a lot of school districts have suffered large enrollment decreases. And in the 2 years since the pandemic hit, Minnesota's public schools lost 2.55% of their students. Some of the largest losses were at Minneapolis Public Schools, St. Paul, Burnsville, Buffalo, and Anoka-Hennepin. But counter to that, some districts bucked the trend, and they mentioned specifically Hopkins as being one that bucked the trend and actually saw increases of 1.5% in the 2 years. That's why I'm troubled by our most recent enrollment report for the month of May, because it shows a decrease during the year. But I think overall for the year we're on the plus side. But the pandemic has had really devastating effects on some school districts, and luckily we've been exempt from that to this point. So that's my report.
Thank you, Director Adams. Other board member reports this evening? Okay, well, with that, I would look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adjourn. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. This meeting of the Hopkins School Board is adjourned at 8:20 p.m. Let's take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back here and start our executive session.
I think adjournment